A stack of cream-colored gold embossed wedding invitations sat on the living room coffee table. A small smoldering fire of thick cardstock. The air still held the faint, sickly sweet scent of a champagne we'd taste-tested yesterday. Tomorrow, Chloe Miller and I were supposed to get married. 5 years from holding hands like nervous kids on the quad to splitting ramen in a cramped studio apartment and finally to this place, a condo with a sweeping view of the Chicago River. Life had been a grindstone, rough but real. I thought this was it forever. My phone buzzed in my pocket once, then again, it wasn't Chloe. She'd be at her final fitting for that ridiculously expensive custom gown or getting her nails done with her flock of screeching bridesmaids. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a name, Caleb Shaw, Chloe's best guy friend, a shadow that had clung to her since high school. He came from money, had a slick, punchable face, and always looked at me with a vague, unearned sense of superiority. Caleb's just like a brother to me. Don't be weird about it. Chloe would always say. I believed her. Or rather, I couldn't be bothered to dig deeper. A man's got to have some confidence. My thumb slid across the screen. It wasn't a text. It was a video. The thumbnail was just a dark blur. Below it, a line of text dripped with a special kind of poison. Leo, you need to see this. Your precious bride-to-be. Guess who she's with right now? My heart seized, a cold fist clenching around it. My fingertips went numb for a few seconds. My thumb hovered over the screen before I pressed down hard. The video played. The lighting was dim. The kind of sleazy amber glow from a hotel bedside lamp. The camera was shaky, struggling to focus. Then the image sharpened. White hotel sheets, 2 bodies entwined. The woman's head was thrown back, her long hair a mess against the pillows. Her face was flushed, her mouth open in a familiar broken moan. It was Chloe. She was wearing the lavender lace lingerie I'd bought her on my last business trip, the one she said she adored. The man on top of her turned his head to the camera, a triumphant twisted grin splitting his face. Caleb. He even had the audacity to pull one hand away to flash a crude gesture at the lens. A low animal growl escaped my throat. It wasn't just anger. It was something colder, sharper that shot through me like a shard of ice. My blood ran cold. The video wasn't over. Caleb's disgusting face filled the screen. He leaned close, his voice ragged with exertion. Every word a poison-tipped dart. See that, Leo? Your bride is a real firecracker. Screams a hell a lot louder for me than she ever did for you. 5 years. You're a __. Chump. You tended the garden for 5 years and couldn't even get it to bloom. Bet I knocked her up in one night. You lost. You completely and utterly lost. Tomorrow, get ready to be the laughingstock of the entire city. Loser. The video ended frozen on Caleb's distorted laughing face. The world went silent. The invitations on the coffee table burned my eyes. The sweet smell of champagne now rare of rot. I turned off the video. The dark screen reflected my own ashen face. I didn't smash the phone. I didn't scream. My fingers steady as a surgeon's. Opened my contacts and found a number for Elise's wedding planner. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice a geyser of professional enthusiasm. Mr. Vance just calling to say everything is triple confirmed. The venue, the flowers, the band, the officiant. We are all set for the big. Cancel it. My voice was calm, devoid of any emotion as if I were discussing a trivial matter. I am sort of Mr. Vance. What did you say? Elise's voice hitched, laced with disbelief. I said, cancel it. The wedding right now. All of it. I enunciated every word with cold precision. Keep the deposit. I'll pay any and all cancellation fees. Mr. Vance, are you kidding me? The wedding is tomorrow. The guests have all been notified. The hotel, the cars, the reception, the financial losses are you and Miss Miller? Just do it. I cut him off. My tone leaving no room for argument. Money is not the issue. Stop everything now. Do you understand? A few seconds of dead air, then a shaky, stunned reply. Yes. Yes, Mr. Vance. I'll get on it right away. I hung up and immediately dialed the next number for the general manager of the hotel. Mr. Davis, the Vance wedding reception for tomorrow is canceled. All room bookings are void. Bill, my account for the contractual penalty. Mr. Vance, is everything all right? His voice was steadier than Elisa's, but no less shocked. Handle it. Next was the car service, the florist, the bakery, the band, the officiant. One call after another. My voice remained a flat robotic monotone. Inform, cancel, confirm payment of fees. Not a single word of explanation. With every call I ended, the silence in the apartment grew heavier. The crimson pile of invitations seemed to mock me from the coffee table. Then my phone erupted. The name flashing on the screen was the one I had just seen moaning in the video. Chloe. I watched it ring for a dozen cycles before sliding to answer. Now Chloe's shriek tore through the speaker, a mix of tears, panic, and sheer rage. Are you insane? What the hell are you doing? Elise just called me. She said the wedding is off. What does that mean? The guests are on their way. My parents, your parents, all our friends and family. What is wrong with you? Her words tumbled out in a frantic rush. I could picture her perfectly. Perfect makeup straight with tears standing in that overpriced gown like a deflated parade float, utterly hysterical. I could even hear her bridesmaids chirping in confusion in the background. Lau, say something. Are you mute? Do you have any idea what you're doing? How am I supposed to face anyone tomorrow? I changed my mind. I said into the phone for quiet words that acted like a bucket of ice water freezing the torrent of noise on her end. WH what? Chloe's voice jumped an octave, cracking with absurdity. Change your mind. Leo, are you, kidding me? This is our wedding, not a dinner reservation. You can't just change your mind. Beep beep beep. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I pressed the annul button. The world was finally, blessedly, quiet. I tossed the phone onto the sofa and walked over to the stack of invitations. I picked one up. It featured a photo of Chloe and me smiling like idiots. My fingertips dug into the cardstock. The harsh tearing sound echoed in the silent room. The photograph of Chloe's radiant face was ripped in two. I crumpled the half with my name on it and tossed it into the trash. The other half, the piece with her fractured smile, I carried to the massive floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, the city lights sparkled like a fallen galaxy. Tomorrow was supposed to be the brightest day of my life. I opened my hand. The scrap of paper bearing Chloe's smile fluttered down into the deep darkness below, swallowed without a trace. Slowly, a humorless, ice-cold smile stretched across my face. The game was on. Caleb. Chloe, I hope you're ready to pay the price. The phone was as silent as a brick. Chloe didn't call back. She was probably still screaming or desperately trying to salvage the wreckage with the vendors. Caleb was quiet, too. His poison lace video was the bomb he'd thrown. And now he was likely hiding, waiting to watch me fall apart, waiting to see me become a citywide joke tomorrow. He was going to be disappointed. I went to my home office and powered on my laptop. The cold light of the screen illuminating my face. There was no rage, no grief, only a chilling surgical calm. I was a surgeon with a scalpel making the first incision. My objective clear: locate the tumor and cut it out. Caleb Shaw, he was the first malignancy to be excised. His family's business, Shaw Imports. It was a mid-tier trading company that had gotten its start thanks to some lucky breaks and the cunning of its founder. They mainly dealt in construction materials and imported consumer goods. Caleb's father, Robert Shaw, was a classic new money type. Shrewd, greedy, and reeking of arrogance. Caleb was his only son, spoiled, rotten, and utterly useless. He held the title of vice president, but spent his days chasing women, racing cars, and burning through his father's money. The company was kept afloat by a few loyal old school managers. I'd heard rumors the books were a mess. This information surfaced in my mind, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Over the last 5 years, through Chloe, I'd picked up bits and pieces about the Shaw family. Caleb had bragged to me about his new sports car, whined about his dad cutting off his allowance, and boasted about some huge deal the company had landed. I dismissed him as a shallow fool. Then now those scattered details were coordinates marking his every vulnerability. I logged into a heavily encrypted overseas server and launched a minimalist application. It was one of the tools I'd acquired during my years on Wall Street, a backdoor into specific financial and commercial databases. High risk, high reward. Right now, it was my sharpest weapon. I typed in Shaw Imports and hit enter. A torrent of data flooded the screen. Corporate registration, shareholder structure, years of financial statements, tax records, bank transactions, lists of key suppliers and clients, mortgage agreements, even internal emails and meeting minutes. The cold, hard data scrolled past, weaving a transparent net that exposed Shaw Imports from the inside out. My eyes skinned the data stream like a probe, locking onto anomalies. There. For the last 3 years, the financial statements looked decent, showing revenue growth. But a closer look at the cost of goods sold, specifically logistics and import tariffs, revealed numbers that were absurdly inflated, far exceeding industry averages. Bank records showed that several mysterious consulting firms registered in the British Virgin Islands were making large, regular payments to Shaw Imports for services rendered. That money was then funneled into two shell corporations controlled personally by Robert Shaw under the guise of procurement costs. It was a classic case of related party transactions designed to transfer profits and evade a massive amount of taxes. But the kill shot was in an internal email 3 months ago to secure a so-called mega deal in Southeast Asia. Robert Shaw had personally approved a plan to mortgage nearly all of the company's real estate and inventory. He had taken out over $80 million in short-term bridge loans from 3 different banks and 2 private lenders. In the email, Robert was brimming with confidence. "This deal is a sure thing. We'll double our profits and pay back the loans with ease." In the contract for that mega deal, I pulled up the scanned copy. The counterparty was an obscure Southeast Asian company with laughably little registered capital. The terms were brutal. A tiny down payment and astronomically high penalties for breach of contract. It was a textbook trap. Robert Shaw, blinded by greed and his own gambler's fallacy, had willfully ignored all the red flags. And Caleb, he probably hadn't even read the contract. Too busy planning how to spend the money. My fingers moved across the keyboard cold and precise. I compiled all of it. The evidence of financial fraud, the illegal transactions, the massive tax evasion, the high-risk loan agreements and mortgage documents, the money trail leading to Robert Shaw's offshore accounts. I packaged the most damning, irrefutable proof into several compressed files. Then I opened a new email draft. The recipients were a carefully curated list. A senior agent at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the head of risk management at Shaw's primary lending bank, the notoriously ruthless owners of the 2 private lending firms, and a few key competitors who had been waiting for a chance to devour Shaw Imports. The subject line was simple and terrifying. Core evidence: financial fraud, tax evasion, loan fraud, and asset stripping at Shaw Imports. Robert Shaw. The body of the email contained a single sentence. "The attached is real. Act fast, a concerned citizen." My cursor hovered over the send button. The screen's glow reflected off my emotionless face. The image of Caleb's sneering face in the video and Chloe's furious screaming on the phone flashed through my mind. I didn't hesitate. Click. Send. The toxic emails vanished into the digital ether. Silent missiles streaking toward their targets. I closed the laptop, plunging the office back into darkness. I walked to the window and looked out at the city, still glittering below. The city was sleeping, but a storm was silently gathering over the house of Shaw. My phone lit up again. It was Chloe calling from a different number. I declined to call and blocked the number. A few seconds later, another unknown number. I answered. Loud. Chloe's voice was raw from crying, thick with a forced anger that couldn't hide the tremor of fear beneath it. "What do you want from me? Do you have any idea what you destroyed? My parents are going to kill me. Caleb." The mention of his name made my eyes narrow. "Chloe." I interrupted, my voice as calm as if I were discussing the weather. "The wedding is off. We're over. As for Caleb," I paused, a cold smile touching my lips. "You'll find out what I want very soon. Enjoy the quiet while it lasts." Before she could respond, I hung up and blocked that number too. The world was finally completely silent. The gears of my revenge had begun to turn. "Caleb, your charmed life is over. And this is just the beginning." The days that followed were a strange mix of chaos and calm. The shock wave from the canceled wedding was for a few days a tsunami. My parents' phones rang off the hook with questions, tears, and confusion from relatives. I took one call from them, said only Chloe did something unforgivable, and then went silent. They knew my stubborn nature, and after a heavy sigh, became my buffer. Fielding the barrage of inquiries, Chloe's side was pure pandemonium. She and her parents took turns blitzing my phone with unknown numbers. The messages were a desperate cocktail of furious curses, sobbing, pleas, and eventually pathetic rambling excuses. It was a misunderstanding. Caleb was just comforting me. "The video isn't what it looks like. I was drunk. Nothing happened. You can't do this to me after 5 years." It was all just pathetic, meaningless noise. I didn't reply to a single message. Didn't answer a single call. Every new number was blocked. They were like flies buzzing against a pane of glass, making a lot of noise, but utterly incapable of reaching me. My world had narrowed to 2 things. My cold, calculated plan and the patient wait. Caleb, surprisingly, kept his head down. After that initial triumphant video, he'd vanished. Was he so certain I was powerless, or was he just hiding, waiting to watch the scandal of a jilted groom crush me? So naive? My silence was the eerie quiet before a hurricane. The first signs of a storm arrived faster than I'd expected. For days after the canceled wedding, a push notification from financial news app popped up on my phone. The headline was stark. Breaking. Shaw Imports facing sudden financial crisis. Multiple banks were calling loans. Suppliers demanding payment. I tapped the link. The article was short but dense with information. It cited multiple reliable sources claiming that Shaw Imports was undergoing a surprise audit by the IRS for suspected major tax fraud. Simultaneously, its primary lenders had frozen its credit lines and were calling in outstanding loans due to risk management concerns. To top it all off, several long-term suppliers had gathered that morning outside the Shaw Imports headquarters, holding banners and demanding payment for months of overdue invoices. The accompanying photo showed a crowd of angry people in front of Shaw's modest office building holding signs that read, "Shaw Imports owes us and Robert Shaw pay your debts." Efficient. I closed the news app, my expression unchanged. This was just the appetizer. My phone vibrated. It was a number I didn't have saved, but I knew who it was. Robert Shaw's personal cell. I answered. The voice, on the other end, was no longer the calculated, growly tone of a self-made man. It was the raw, cornered roar of a dying animal. The background was a cacophony of shouting and slamming doors. "Lau, was it you? You did this, didn't you?" Robert Shaw's voice was shredded, cracking with rage. "Mr. Shaw, is there a problem?" My tone was placid. "Don't, play dumb with me," he screamed. "The IRS, the banks, my suppliers, they're all crawling on my ass. Did you report me? Is this your sick little game? All because of my son." "Mr. Shaw," I interrupted, injecting a note of mild, innocent confusion into my voice. "Your company seems to be having some operational difficulties. An IRS audit, banks recalling loans, suppliers demanding payment. These are just the risks of doing business. What does any of that have to do with me? I'm just a poor guy whose wedding was canceled thanks to the gift your son sent me." Robert had lost all composure. "I'm warning you, Leo. Don't think you're so tough just because he spent a few years on Wall Street. You want to take me down? You're not smart enough. My family has been in this city for decades. You just wait. I'm Mr. Shaw." My voice turned to ice. "Instead of screaming at me, you might want to figure out how you're going to cover that $80 million bridge loan. And the IRS, oh, and I heard that company in Southeast Asia just filed for bankruptcy protection. Looks like your down payment on that mega deal is gone for good, isn't it?" The line went dead silent. All I could hear was Robert's ragged, terrified breathing. He clearly never imagined I knew about his most critical, fatal secret. How did you know?" His voice was a shaky whisper filled with pure unadulterated fear. "How I know isn't important," I said coolly. "What's important, Mr. Shaw, is that your time is running out. The banks, the loan sharks, the IRS penalties, not to mention all those angry suppliers. How many days do you think your little empire has left?" "Lau," it was a howl of despair. "What do you want? Money? How much? Name your price. Just leave, my son. Leave my company alone." "Money?" I let out a soft mocking laugh. "Mr. Shaw, do you really think I need your money?" And as for leaving Caleb alone, my voice dropped, each word a spike of ice. I quite enjoyed the wedding gift he sent me. So, I prepared an even bigger one for him and for you. I hope you enjoy it. We're just getting started." I hung up, severing the connection, leaving him to drown in his own terror. The phone immediately rang again. It was Chloe. Her voice was no longer angry or pleading. It was filled with a raw primal panic. "Leo, please pick up. It's an emergency. Something's happened to Caleb's family. His dad, his company is ruined. The bankers, debt collectors, the IRS. They're everywhere. Now, was it you? Did you do this? How could you be so cruel?" "Caleb." "Chloe." I said her name calmly, and it stopped her tirade cold. Feeling sorry for him. My voice was flat, unreadable. "This is nothing. Caleb loves to show off, right? So proud of himself for stealing another man's fiancée. Well, you can tell him that his family ship is sinking. And this is just the first wave. He should hold on tight to his daddy and enjoy the ride. And you? I'd stay far away from him if I were you. You wouldn't want to get dragged down with them. Now, you bastard. You're insane." Her voice cracked, distorted by rage and fear. I had no interest in hearing her curses. I hung up and blocked the new number. The world was quiet again. I knew, however, that for the Shaw family, hell was just beginning. Robert's collapse, Caleb's terror, Chloe's panic. Their anguish was like a fine wine. I walked to the bar and poured a glass of whiskey. I didn't drink it. I just watched the amber liquid swirl. For the first time, a current of cold, satisfying pleasure ran down my spine. Caleb, you thought you'd won, but victory has a price, and you've only just begun to pay the interest. The fall of the House of Shaw was as swift and total as a landslide. The poison pen emails I'd sent were like precision-guided missiles, detonating the rotten core of Shaw imports. The IRS audit report was damning, and the bill for back taxes, penalties, and interest drained the last of the family's liquid assets. The banks and private lenders, smelling blood and terrified of being left with nothing, descended like vultures. Lawsuits and court summons piled up at Robert Shaw's office and home. The suppliers he'd stiffed for months grew raid, blocking the entrance to his corporate office and even protesting outside his gated community. For days, the business and local news sections were dominated by the Shaw imports implosion. Robert Shaw, once a minor player in the city's business scene, was now a pariah, a deadbeat, and a fraud. Reporters like sharks swarmed his office and his home. Cameras ready to capture any glimpse of the family's ruin. Robert Shaw was broken. He tried to sell off assets, but his accounts were frozen and his properties were seized by the courts. Even the fleet of luxury sports cars he'd bought for Caleb had lean slapped on them. Friends and business associates who had once clapped him on the back now ignored his calls and pretended not to be home. The fall was absolute. Inside the Shaw family mansion, the storm raged. Heavy drapes were drawn, shutting out the prying eyes of the world, but trapping the suffocating atmosphere of despair. The living room was a disaster. Shards of shattered vase littered the expensive rug. Ashtrays overflowed with cigarette butts, and the air was thick with a stench of stale smoke, liquor, and defeat. Robert Shaw looked as if he'd aged 20 years overnight. His hair was a mess. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot, and he stared blankly at the ceiling, clutching an empty bottle of bourbon. His designer suit was rumpled, his tie askew. "It's over. It's all over," he muttered, his voice a dry hoarse whisper. "A lifetime of work. Gone." Caleb was curled up on the opposite sofa, his face ashen, his eyes vacant. He was trembling uncontrollably. His trendy Givenchy t-shirt was wrinkled and stained. His usual arrogance had been crushed, replaced by a profound, gnawing fear. All he could see was Leo's terrifyingly calm face. All he could hear were his words. "We're just getting started." A heavy shadow hung over him, making it hard to breathe. Dad, what are we going to do?" Caleb's voice was a choked sob. "Those collectors, they said, if we don't pay, they're going to break my legs." He shivered violently, remembering the menacing faces of the men who had been pounding on their door. "What are we going to do?" Robert shot upright, his eyes blazing with a furious, desperate energy. "You're asking me what we're going to do. If it wasn't for you, you worthless piece of trash. If you hadn't provoked that monster, Leo, would we be in this mess?" He hurled the empty bottle against the floor. It exploded with a deafening crash. "I told you to stay away from that girl, Chloe. I told you to have your fun, but not to get serious. And I definitely told you not to mess with her fiancé. But you didn't listen. Are you happy now? You screwed your way into ruining this entire family." Robert pointed a shaking finger at his son, his voice a thundering roar. Caleb shrank back, tears and snot streaming down his face. I didn't know. I didn't know he was like this. So ruthless. Dad, I am sorry. I was wrong. Please, you have to save me. Save us." "Save you with what?" Robert collapsed back onto the sofa, all the fight draining out of him. "Money? Where is it? The house, the cars, the company. It's all gone. Everything. The vultures are circling. It's over for me." For Robert Shaw. 2 grimy tears traced paths down his weathered cheeks. Just then, the doorbell began to ring incessantly, accompanied by violent banging on the front door. "Shaw, open up. Stop playing dead and pay what you owe. If I don't get my money today, I'll burn this whole damn house to the ground." It was one of the private lenders, far more direct and far more dangerous than the banks. A shudder racked Robert's body. The last spark of hope in his eyes died, leaving only the ashes of despair. He staggered to his feet, ignoring the commotion at the door, ignoring his trembling son. Like a ghost, he drifted toward the stairs. Dad, where are you going?" Caleb cried out in alarm. Robert didn't answer. His stooped figure disappeared around the landing. A few minutes later, crump, a sickening, heavy thud echoed from the back of the house. So loud it cut through the noise of the front door. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The banging at the door ceased. In the living room, the blood drained from Caleb's face. His body went rigid, his pupils dilating in absolute terror. An icy premonition, venomous and certain, slithered into his mind. He scrambled toward the glass doors that led to the backyard, his fumbling hands tearing at the drapes. Bright sunlight flooded the room. On the manicured lawn below, his father, Robert, lay in a twisted, unnatural heap. A dark, viscous pool of crimson was spreading rapidly from beneath him, glistening horribly in the sun. Caleb's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Only a strangled, wheezing gasp. Fear, cold and absolute, had its hands around his throat, squeezing the air from his lungs, crushing his heart. His legs gave out and he collapsed to the floor as a hot stream of urine soaked through his pants. His dad had jumped. Lau had driven him to it. The realization seared itself onto his soul like a branding iron. Outside, the brief silence erupted into chaos. Gasps from reporters, the frantic clicking of cameras, the angry shouts of the creditors. Inside, crumpled on the cold marble floor, Caleb Shaw trembled like a leaf in a hurricane, his vacant eyes fixed on the horrifying scene in the yard, his mouth forming silent, broken sobs. Now the devil. The sky had fallen on the house of Shaw, and for Caleb, the gates of hell had just swung open. Robert Shaw's suicide was gasoline on a raging fire, catapulting the story of a Shaw Imports collapse into a grisly sensational spectacle. CEO plunges to death amidst company's ruin. Detriton founder of Shaw Imports dead in apparent suicide. From mogul to corpse, the bloody end of the Shaw Empire. The headlines were merciless. The shocking scene in the Shaw's backyard, captured by a dozen telephoto lenses, was plastered across the internet, heavily blurred, but unmistakable. Robert's death became the tragic, bloody climax of the corporate drama, and it cemented his son's role as the villain. Prodigal son, family destroyer, the kid who killed his own father. The label stuck to Caleb like tar. He became a public pariah. His name a magnet for the most venomous curses and mockery on social media. His history of flaunting his wealth, his womanizing, his arrogance. It was all dredged up and served as proof that he deserved his fate. The mansion was seized by the court, its contents slated for auction. Like a stray dog, Caleb was kicked out of the only home he'd ever known. He was penniless. His phone had been snatched by an angry creditor as a down payment. He had no home to return to, no friends to call. They either feared the debt collectors or reveled in his downfall. And he couldn't show his face in public without being drowned in scorn. He became a ghost, using the last few dollars in his pocket to rent a windowless, foul-smelling room in a rundown tenement on the industrial outskirts of the city. Cockroaches skittered across the damp walls, and the air was thick with the sounds of his neighbors' drunken fights and a constant reek of mold and urine. He was a world away from his former life of champagne and silk sheets. Fear and regret gnawed at him, a pair of snakes devouring him from the inside out. He couldn't close his eyes without seeing his father's broken body on the lawn. He couldn't escape the image of Leo's calm, demonic face, his every waking moment a living nightmare. He slept with the lights on, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. Convinced that Leo was watching him from the shadows, that a collector's knife was about to find his throat. He needed money. He needed to hide. He needed a lifeline. And like a drowning man clutching at a straw, he thought of Chloe, the woman he'd so casually taken, the woman he'd used to humiliate Leo. On a cold, rainy night, he slipped through the city like a phantom, making his way on foot to the luxury apartment building where Chloe lived. He hid behind a dumpster, soaked to the bone and shivering, his eyes glued to the building's entrance. He was too afraid to go up, terrified of being thrown out by the doorman, or worse, running into Chloe's parents. After what felt like an eternity, her familiar white Audi pulled into the driveway. Chloe got out, popping open an umbrella. She looked tired with dark circles under her eyes, but her coat and the bag on her arm were still designer. The fall of the Shaws hadn't yet touched her lifestyle. Chloe. Chloe. Caleb scrambled from his hiding spot and lunged toward her, nearly knocking the umbrella from her hand. Ah, she screamed, stumbling back from the sudden wraith-like figure. When she recognized him, the color drained from her face, replaced by a mask of pure horror and disgust. The man before her was not the slick, preppy Caleb she knew. His hair was greasy and matted. His face was covered in patchy stubble, and his eyes were hollow and wild. His clothes were filthy and torn, and he smelled of sour sweat and desperation. He looked like a homeless person. "It's you, Caleb. What? What happened to you?" Her voice trembled. She held her umbrella like a shield, a barrier against the contagion of his ruin. "Chloe, help me. Please, you have to help me." Caleb dropped to his knees on the wet pavement, splashing muddy water onto her expensive boots. Tears and rainwater streamed down his face as he grabbed at the hem of her coat. My dad's dead. Leo killed him. I have nothing left. The house is gone. The money is gone. The collectors are after me. They're going to kill me. Chloe, please, for old time's sake, you have to help me. Just lend me some money so I can disappear. Please, I'm begging you. Get off me. Chloe shrieked, kicking her leg free as if you were a rabid animal. Her voice was sharp with fear and revulsion. Don't touch me. Get away from me, Caleb. Your dad is dead because of you. You're the one who poked the bear. You're the one who ruined everything. You brought this on yourself, and you dragged me down with you. She looked at the pathetic man groveling in the mud and felt nothing but cold, hard fury. This was a man who had destroyed her perfect wedding, her future, her reputation. And now he wanted to pull her under with him. Old time sake. What old times? Her voice dripped with venom. If it wasn't for you for that night, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't have lost Leo. I wouldn't be the laughingstock of my family. My parents yell at me every day. Our friends whisper behind my back. This is all your fault. Your curse. A walking disaster. Get out of my sight. Go before I call the police. Her words were daggers, each one finding its mark. Caleb's last shred of hope shattered under the weight of her vicious, undisguised hatred. He knelt in the rain, stunned as Chloe turned and fled into the building, her every movement radiating disgust. The cold rain soaked through his thin jacket, a chill that seeped deep into his bones. He watched the heavy glass door swing shut behind her, sealing him out of the bright, warm world he once took for granted. Okay. A desperate, inhuman howl ripped from his throat, echoing through the desolate, rainy street. The sound of a man with nothing left to lose. Now, Chloe, I'll see you both in hell. I swear to God, I'll get you for this. He screamed his curses into the storm like a cornered animal, but the only reply was the cold, indifferent rain. The foul-smelling room in the tenement was his only sanctuary. He crawled back into its filth, a walking corpse, and curled up on a moldy mattress, nibbling on stale bread, rotting away in a prison of his own making, consumed by terror and a burning, impotent rage. Caleb Shaw, once the proud peacock, was now a sewer rat, awaiting his final extermination. And his curses, against the cold, calculating power he had unleashed, they were nothing but whispers in the wind. Leo's revenge was far from over, and Chloe's peace was nothing but a fleeting illusion. Caleb Shaw had vanished into the city's underbelly, his impotent curses swallowed by the night. Leo didn't need to lift another finger against him. Caleb's own choices had dug a pit deep enough to bury him forever. Bankrupt, orphaned, ostracized, and disgraced, left to rot in filth. It was the bespoke ending Leo had designed for him, a fate more thorough and lasting than any physical violence. But Chloe, the genesis of the betrayal, the woman who had stomped on 5 years of his life on the eve of their wedding, her reckoning was just beginning. The storm that had obliterated the Shaws had seemingly passed her by. She still lived in her expensive high-rise, carried her designer bags, and drove her white Audi. She was even attempting damage control, carefully curating a narrative for their social circle about a misunderstanding, vaguely blaming the canceled wedding on pre-wedding jitters and irreconcilable differences. She thought Leo's fury was reserved for Caleb. She thought that with enough time, the gossip would die down and she could start over. How naive. Leo's focus had never left her. His revenge wasn't a single impulsive act of rage. It was a meticulous multi-stage demolition. Caleb was the appetizer. Chloe was the main course. He wouldn't be satisfied until she was stripped of everything she valued. Her image, her career, her financial security, and left with nothing but the bitter taste of her own betrayal. First, he would cut off her money. Chloe's family was comfortable, but far from wealthy. Her respectable but modestly paid job as a designer, supplemented by allowances from her parents, was what sustained her curated lifestyle. More importantly, she had grown accustomed to the life Leo had provided, a dependency he was now ready to exploit. Leo picked up his phone and dialed a number. His voice was casual, as if arranging a lunch meeting. "Chun, I need you to look into someone for me. Chloe Miller works at an agency called Vidian Design. I want to know about her performance, specifically any side hustles using company resources or maybe repurposing client designs. You know the drill." The man on the other end, Chun, was a discreet private investigator, a master of digging up dirt and shaping narratives. His voice was all business. "Understood, Mr. Vance. A small agency like that, finding something won't be hard. Give me 2 days." 2 days later, a detailed report landed in Leo's encrypted inbox. It clearly documented 3 freelance projects Chloe had taken on over the past year using her office computer and software, with the payments going directly to her personal account. But the real prize was evidence that a branding concept she designed for a local coffee chain was suspiciously similar, in some places identical to a pitch she had submitted for one of the agency's major clients. It wasn't quite enough for a lawsuit, but in the design world, it was professional poison. A cold smile touched Leo's lips. It was enough. He didn't need to destroy her in court. He just needed to light the fuse. He anonymously forwarded the key findings of the report along with screenshots of Chloe's off-the-books payments to the owner of Vidian Design, CC&G, the HR director, and 2 senior designers who were known to be her rivals. The effect was instantaneous. The following afternoon, Chloe was summoned to her boss's office. Through the frosted glass walls, the entire office could hear the muffled sounds of a heated argument. Chloe's voice was sharp with denial, then devolved into tearful pleading, and finally resigned silence. Half an hour later, she emerged, her face pale and her eyes swollen, clutching a cardboard box filled with her personal effects. She walked the gauntlet of her coworkers' stares, a mixture of pity, contempt, and unconcealed glee, and stumbled out the front door, fired. The official reason circulated in a blunt internal memo was gross misconduct and actions detrimental to the company's reputation. "Chloe, what happened? What was the boss so angry about?" a so-called friend from the office asked, finding concern as she followed her out. Chloe's lips trembled, but no words came out. She just clutched the box and fled to her car. The moment she started the engine, her phone rang. It was her mother. "Chloe, what in God's name did you do? Your boss just called me. He said you were fired for misconduct. Are you trying to kill us? Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. First the wedding, now this. You get yourself home right now and explain this mess." "Mom, I didn't." Chloe's defense was weak, pathetic, as a fresh wave of tears blinded her. "Don't lie to me. Your boss wouldn't make this up. We have been humiliated by you, Chloe. Humiliated. All our friends, our family, they're all talking about us. Do you want us to die of shame? I don't care what you did. You get home now." The line went dead. Chloe collapsed over the steering wheel, sobbing uncontrollably. Her job was gone. The support of her family, her last refuge, was gone. It had to be Leo. The thought coiled in her gut like a venomous snake. An overwhelming, suffocating fear took hold of her. What else was he going to do? Losing her job and facing her family's wrath was only the beginning. Leo wanted her to suffer a complete social death. He wanted the pristine, perfect image he had so carefully crafted to be shattered in front of everyone. Chin's second phase of operations began the day after Chloe was fired. A series of insider tips appeared simultaneously on several popular local gossip blogs and online forums. The posts were carefully worded, never mentioning her by name, but the details were unmistakable. Shocker. Local sociale's wedding canceled after fiancé catches her with best friend. Inside scoop. Why was Vidian designer CM really fired? The scandal you won't believe. Thought your best friend was the threat. Try the male bestie. Local woman loses it all after cheating days before wedding. The posts were a toxic blend of fact and fiction, painting a sordid picture of Chloe's long-standing affair with Caleb, suggesting she was using her fiancé, Leo, for his money and status. Then came the masterstroke. A few hours after the blog post went live, anonymous sources leaked crucial evidence to the city's biggest online forum. Heavily blurred, but still recognizable screenshots from the video Caleb had sent, showing Chloe's face and Caleb's leering grin. It was accompanied by a screenshot of Caleb's text message. "You lose, Leo. Game over." The combination was explosive. OMG, that's Chloe Miller. I saw her wedding posts on Instagram. Wow, she seems so sweet. Guess you never know. Total snake male bestie. LOL. Just call him what he is. The side piece who got greedy. She deserves this. Feel bad for her fiancé. 5 years. And she does this to him right before the wedding. Brutal. Heard. This is why she got fired, too. Karma is swift. Isn't that Caleb Shaw? The guy whose dad just jumped off a roof. What a pair. They deserve each other. The online mob descended. Chloe's social media accounts were flooded with thousands of hateful comments and messages. Her phone number was leaked and she was bombarded with calls and texts, people screaming insults, sending vile messages, even reporters asking for a comment. Terrified, she shut off her phone, disconnected her internet, and drew every blind in her apartment, hiding in the dark like a cornered animal. But there was no escape. When she crept out to take out the trash, she saw her neighbors whispering, their eyes burning with judgment. The cashier at the corner store recognized her and flinched away, avoiding her hand as he gave her change. She was a pariah, a walking scandal. She tried calling her friends, the few she thought she could trust. The calls went to voicemail or were answered with awkward, hurried excuses. She was utterly alone. Overwhelmed by the crushing weight of it all, Chloe finally snapped. She hurled a glass against the wall, swept everything off her coffee table, and let out a raw, hysterical scream in the empty apartment. Fear, regret, humiliation, and despair chewed at her sanity. She hated Caleb for tempting her, but she hated Leo more for his cold, merciless cruelty. How could he do this? He was trying to destroy her. In the midst of her breakdown, the doorbell chimed. Not the aggressive banging of a debt collector, just a simple polite ring. Chloe froze, her breath catching her throat. Who is it? A reporter? A troll who'd found her address? Or shaking, she tiptoed to the door and peered through the peephole. A courier stood in the hallway holding a thin document mailer. Package for Chloe Miller, he called out. Signature required. She hesitated, her fear wearing with a sliver of desperate hope. What if it was an apology, a peace offering? She cracked the door open, hastily signed the tablet, snatched the mailer, and slammed the door shut, throwing the deadbolt. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the plain manila envelope. No return address. A deep sense of dread washed over her. She tore it open. Inside was a single printed sheet of paper. The words at the top of the page in cold black letters stabbed at her eyes: paternity test report. At the bottom of the page under the heading conclusion, a single sentence was printed in bold. Based on DNA analysis, Caleb Shaw cannot be excluded as the biological father of the fetus. The report was stamped with the official seal of a leading forensic lab in the city. The fetus. The world dissolved into a deafening roar. Black spots danced her vision. She was pregnant. How? She thought the timing. And it was Caleb's. The shock was a physical blow more devastating than anything that had come before. A wave of dizziness washed over her and her legs buckled. She slid down the door to the floor, the flimsy piece of paper fluttering from her numb fingers. Lao. He knew. He knew everything. This was his final, most cruel message. You didn't just betray me. You're carrying my rival's child. No. No. It's not true. It can't be. Huddled on the floor, Chloe wrapped her arms around her head, digging her nails into her scalp. A choked animalistic whimper escaped her lips. Her last secret, her deepest shame, had been exposed, leaving her naked and broken in the ruins of her life. The paternity test was a death sentence. It annihilated the last of Chloe's defenses, plunging her into a catatonic state of despair. She stayed on the floor of her apartment for days, a hollowed-out shell surrounded by a mess she didn't have the will to clean. The world was reduced to the four walls of her silent prison. Her only companions the shame, the regret, and the terrifying, undeniable truth growing inside her. Leo's revenge was a masterpiece of cruelty, not only destroying her present but also poisoning her entire future. But his gift had one final layer. He intended to strip her of her last material comfort to leave her with absolutely nothing. A few days later, when Chloe finally roused herself, driven by the practical need to pay the next quarter's rent, she discovered her bank account had been frozen. A call to the bank's automated service delivered the chilling news. Her account was subject to a legal hold due to an investigation into improper reception of funds and potential liability in an ongoing debt collection case. Debt collection. The word sent a jolt of ice through her veins. It had to be Caleb. The creditors, unable to find him, were coming after her. Her association with him, once a source of illicit excitement, had become a toxic liability. She was half right. The creditors were indeed involved. But it was Leo's invisible hand guiding them. He had discreetly leaked a package of information to the lawyers representing Robert Shaw's most aggressive lenders. It contained evidence of Chloe and Caleb's frequent association before the collapse, security camera stills, credit card receipts from shared meals, and most damningly, a copy of the paternity report presented as proof of their intimate long-term relationship. The ravenous creditors, desperate to claw back any assets connected to the Shaws, immediately targeted Chloe as a likely recipient of Caleb's hidden funds. A court order to freeze her assets was obtained within hours. And it didn't stop there. As Chloe was frantically trying and failing to reach her parents, a sharp knock echoed through her apartment. It wasn't a courier. It was two uniformed court officers and a man in a cheap suit clutching a briefcase. Chloe Miller, the man said, flashing a badge. We're from the County Sheriff's Civil Process Division. We're here on behalf of several plaintiffs in the Shaw Imports bankruptcy case. They have reason to believe that assets belonging to the debtor, Caleb Shaw, may have been transferred to you or being concealed at this residence. We are here to serve you with this notice and conduct a preliminary inventory of the premises. Chloe felt the floor drop out from under her. No, you're mistaken. I'm renting this apartment. It has nothing to do with Caleb Shaw. Ma'am, please calm down, one of the officers said, his voice flat and bored. The plaintiffs have provided evidence suggesting a close personal and financial relationship. We are simply following a court order to document the contents of the property. Please step aside. They brushed past her protests and began walking through her apartment, taking photos, making notes. Though it wasn't an eviction, the invasion of her last remaining sanctuary was a profound violation. It shattered her final illusion of safety. Get out! Get out of my house, she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. But they ignored her, their methodical work a testament to how powerless she had become. After they left, Chloe sank to the floor amidst the disarray, utterly defeated. The money was gone. The apartment would soon follow. Her career was a ruin. Her reputation was toxic. Her family had abandoned her and her friends were ghosts. She had nothing. And the man responsible, the man she had so carelessly betrayed, was at that very moment standing in his new penthouse apartment, looking down on the glittering city. The skyline reflected in the floor-to-ceiling windows, a universe of light at his feet. His phone buzzed with a text from Chun. Mr. Advance, the account freeze and the court inventory are complete. Miller is completely cornered. The paternity test was the kill shot. Attached were a few grainy photos taken by a neighbor of Chloe's tear-streaked, devastated face as the court officers left her building. The photos were already making the rounds on the local forums with captions like karma. Cheating fiancé gets a visit from the repo man. Leo looked at the image of her despair, his expression unreadable. He raised the crystal tumbler in his hand, the amber whiskey catching the light. The clink of ice was the only sound in the vast silent room. He swirled the liquid, watching it, then drained the glass in one smooth motion. A familiar, satisfying burn spread through his chest. 5 years of love, trust, and shared future. All of it betrayed for a cheap thrill and a sneering taunt in a hotel room. And now the betrayer was destitute, disgraced, and trapped by the consequences growing in her own body. The humiliator was a broken, penniless wreck, rotting in a slum. This feeling, this absolute crushing victory was 1,000 times more satisfying than hearing her say, "I'd do ever could have been." Leo set the glass down and walked to the window. He had once thought sharing this view with Chloe was the definition of happiness. He now understood that true satisfaction came from personally kicking the legs out from under your enemies and watching them fall from the top of the world. There was no emptiness, only the exquisite taste of perfectly executed revenge. There was no void, only the powerful, thrilling certainty of total control. His blood hummed with a vitality he hadn't felt in years. This was the ending he deserved. Chloe Miller's disappearance from the world she knew was quiet and absolute. She faded away, not with a bang, but with a silent final closing of doors. Shortly after the court officer's visit, her landlord arrived, a sharp-faced woman whose disgust was palpable. "Miss Miller, I can't have this," she'd said, arms crossed. "Court officers, debt collectors, my other tenants are complaining. My property is being associated with a public scandal. You have violated the terms of your lease. I want you out. You have 3 days." Chloe's pleas were met with a cold, unyielding stare. The gossip blogs, the photos, that whole mess with the Shaw family. "I don't care what your story is. I want my property and its reputation clean. 3 days and don't even think about getting your security deposit back." Her last sanctuary was gone, penniless. Her bank account frozen, her parents still refusing her calls. Chloe was cast adrift. 3 days later, the landlord returned with a locksmith and forced her out. She left with a single suitcase containing a few clothes and the worthless trinkets of a former life. She dragged her suitcase through the bustling city streets, invisible. She had nowhere to go. Home was not an option. Caleb was unthinkable. For hours, she sat on a park bench, a ghost in the autumn chill. The unwanted life inside her, a constant, heavy reminder of her ruin. Finally, swallowing the last of her pride, she made a call to a distant cousin she barely knew. Begging for a place to stay, she was offered a spot on the floor of a cramped apartment in a rough neighborhood on the condition that she handle all the cleaning and find a job immediately. The once radiant designer, the soon-to-be Mrs. Vance, was now sleeping on a floor, scrubbing other people's toilets to earn her keep. The fall was so vast, so complete that it broke something inside her. The light in her eyes went out, replaced by a dull, permanent exhaustion. Meanwhile, the architect of her destruction had already moved on. The ruin of Chloe and Caleb was now just a closed chapter in Leo's life. The act of revenge hadn't left him empty or twisted. It had been a cauterizing fire, burning away the last of his naive sentimentality and forging him into something harder, sharper, and more powerful. He poured his energy back into his work. His reputation, already formidable from his time on Wall Street, was now legendary in the local business community. He was seen as brilliant, ruthless, and unstoppable. His investment firm moved aggressively, acquiring distressed assets, some left in the wake of the Shaw collapse, and turning them into gold. His wealth grew exponentially. He sold the condo he had planned to share with Chloe and moved into an exclusive penthouse overlooking the entire city. His home office was a command center with one wall of streaming global market data and another of pure glass displaying the sprawling urban kingdom below. He stood there now, a glass of red wine in his hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. He was calm, his mind clear, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His phone buzzed. It was his assistant, Mr. Vance. "A final update as you requested. Chloe Miller is living with a relative on the west side. She's working as a cashier at a convenience store. As for Caleb Shaw, he remains in the tenement housing. He's been seen doing odd jobs, sometimes collecting cans. Witnesses say his mental state appears unstable." "Okay," Leo replied, his voice even as if hearing a weather report. "Thank you. No further updates are necessary." He hung up and took a sip of wine. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the city lights began to ignite. A constellation brighter than any in the sky. Chloe's numb existence. Caleb's descent into madness. They were now nothing more than faint, distant echoes. Their suffering could no longer touch him. The fire of vengeance had burned itself out, leaving behind not ashes, but a clean, clear, and vastly expanded landscape. He once thought losing Chloe was the end of his world. He now knew it was simply the demolition of a prison wall, opening his path to a far greater empire. He had lost a lie. In its place, he had gained absolute control over his own destiny, and the feeling was magnificent. Leo drained his glass and turned back to his desk, where plans for a new global venture were laid out. Under the sharp glow of the lamp, his silhouette was that of a king alone in his castle, ready for the next game. This time he owned the entire